The world of CIOs, data centers, the role of IT, it's all changing. And today, on episode number 103, that's what we're talking about with Brian Lillie, who is the CIO of Equinix, a large data center provider. I'm Michael Krigsman, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Vala Offshore. Hey, Vala, how are you?
Michael, I'm doing well, and I'm super excited to learn from one of the best and brightest CIOs in the world. So really, really happy to have this show today.
Well, Vala, this show, metaphorically speaking, is in your neck of the woods because it's all about data center and networking and hardware. But we're actually talking about the IT issues, though, the CIO and cultural issues.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And Brian, thank you so much for being our 103rd guest. And would love to learn a little bit briefly about your background.
Sure. So first of all, I am honored to be 103rd. 2015 is going to be a big year for me because I'm going to work super hard because I want to crack that top 100. I mean, that's my goal, and I'm going to reach it one day. It's sort of like the Fortune 103rd list. I actually started to think about why 103rd, and then I realized you guys are so smart. You're so cutting edge. We have 103 data centers around the world.
That was
it was why you did it. It's amazing. You guys are amazing.
And we weren't going to say anything because we didn't want to embarrass you, but you nailed it.
I just marketing genius on this call. So my first of all, thanks for having me here. I looked at your CXO-Talk list, and I do honestly feel thankful to be a part of the list. Even at 103, I still feel special, and so thanks for having me today.
You're very welcome. Can you give us a little bit of background information and certainly company information for our guests as well?
Sure. So Equinix, we're going on 16 years old, and we are a global data center platform. We have these 103 data centers around the world, and but more than the data centers, we actually protect, connect the digital economy. I mean, that's what we're really trying to do. And the secret sauce of Equinix, besides having very highly reliable, state-of-the-art data centers, is we have an interconnection fabric that is really second to none. We have close to 150,000 interconnections, and those are cross connects, either physical or virtual, where companies that are our customers connect to each other to really move forward digital commerce, and we feel blessed to be sitting in the middle of that and actually able to see what's happening, like who's connecting to who, where the growth is. And we started 15 years ago with this network ecosystem. We have over 1,000 carriers in our facilities, and that's where it all started. And then what followed that were the content guys who said, hey, including Yahoo and others, that said, hey, if I could put my content next to those carriers, I can reach eyeballs all over the world at very low latency. And so they were the first to figure it out. And then the second to figure it out were the financial services firms, and they said, hey, if I connect, if I live within Equinix, I can put my services close to these low latency links and connect to each other, which is why we have many of the matching engines and exchanges within our facility. And then the latest boom that we're seeing really is cloud. Cloud, it is perfectly suited for cloud providers to sit right next to these carriers and cross-connect into the pipes that reach the people. And so cloud is our fastest growing vertical. We have over 500 cloud providers in our facility. And so what this all means for enterprises, which is sort of where I'm excited, because yes, we're a service provider, but I'm the enterprise CIO, and I'm trying to help Equinix grow and scale and be efficient and successful as a company, is enterprises can come in and they can actually leverage not only the network connectivity, but they can leverage the cloud connectivity and really create this new enterprise look, which is where most of the traffic is actually going out to the cloud versus going to some corporate data center somewhere. So it's something I learned from my buddy over. He's no longer there, but at Bechtel. Gare Ramleth. He said, don't bring the network to your data, bring your data to the network. And that's really what we've been doing here.
So, Brian, data centers are a very specific and, for many people, kind of an arcane subject unless you're involved in that segment of technology. So give us a little bit of background on why data centers are exciting today. Because there's a lot happening in data centers because of cloud and the other things we're talking about.
There is. It's a good question because, you know, it's funny. Before I was here, I was at VeriSign, and I really hadn't heard much of this company. And I've been here almost 7 years, and I learned a lot about the inner workings of the internet. You know, we have access to almost 99% of the internet's routes through our facilities. And so when I think about data centers being exciting, you know, that's just sort of a funny sentence, because in you know, my previous experience, it was a building that was sort of segregated, sort of lights out, maybe a handful of people there, you know, a lot of security, you know, and frankly not real exciting. But if you go into sort of the data center of the future, whether it's ours, which is in the retail space, meaning we have many customers in one place, or even you go into a Facebook, you know, major facility, they are pretty exciting. They're technology innovation. They are where the bits sit and traverse and connect, and so it's exciting to see, you know, the digital economy or the digitization of the world, not just the enterprise, but of the world, happen. And a lot of it is happening in these interconnected data centers. And so to me, it's exciting because I'm fortunate I get to have our infrastructure there and take advantage of it. But it's also exciting to see people connect to each other and use that to move their business forward. Examples could be Hulu or Netflix or Foursquare. Those are all customers that sit within our walls and deliver their amazing services through the network pipes that we also host, as well as through each other. You know, they may be directly connected to Amazon, like in the case of Netflix, for its services to run its wonderful service. So I think that's what makes it exciting, is to see our customers innovate and for us to be a part in making that happen.
Sure. Brian, if you look back maybe 5 years ago compared to today, you know, what does a state-of-the-art data center look like?
Well, it's interesting there. You know, I can certainly describe what ours looks like, and I think there are some trends that are consistent. So, you know, one example would be really intelligent cable tray layout for your connectivity. Whether that's making sure that your, you know, certain, whether it's video or audio or high rate data cables are separate, you'll see that they're very intelligently laid out so that you can quickly swap and connect to the service you want to swap and connect to. That's one. Second one is at least in ours, we have this thing, we call it the runway lights. They're blue. It sort of feel like you're in a disco. Down the hallway, it's this blue lighting. It's very efficient lighting. One of our goals is to be energy efficient and drive down PUE, which is a measure of data center efficiency. You know, so green and being eco-friendly is pretty high on our list, and so that's an example of that. And then in our case, you know, and this is born from pragmatism, where, you know, if you've been in IT and you've slogged servers around or switches or routers or cables or whatever, you know that you spend a lot of time there. And so what we've done is we've tried to make it feel a little bit cool, a little bit like home. So for example, when you walk in, we have a big red silo, and in that red silo, it's a beautiful structure. But in that silo are video games and coffee bars and there's Wi-Fi throughout, places you can plug in and configure your gear. Containers with nuts and bolts, just little things that make it, again, born from pragmatism, make it a better place to work, a better place to hang out. And it's always fun when I go in. I give tours to college kids, and and they meet in there an engineer from Facebook or an engineer from Google or an engineer from Hulu, and it's pretty exciting for them to know that the cloud isn't this sort of without shape, amorphous thing. It's actually data centers that are highly connected to networks.
So is that what makes a data center sexy?
Yeah, that and some of the people that work there, that it's a little bit of both.
And what are some future trends that you see? Is there technology? Are you seeing more modular to fixed form factor in terms of the technology that powers the data center? Are they more energy efficient technology that you're researching, investigating? Where do you see some top trends?
Yeah, I think that when you look at economizers to again, this is for greening, and also in certain states you get significant rebates for technologies like that. Solar is still hard because of the vast amounts of power we need to generate, and certain states again have incentives to do that. Some of the technology, we call it hot and cold air containment. Hot, where you have a hot aisle. If you look at how the equipment is laid out, you've got a hot side and a cold side, and so there's a lot of technologies on how do you minimize the hot air or spillover into the cold air and vice versa, and actually vent that out, and again, efficiently. And we've seen, and what's really kind of cool is in these data centers, we try out those things all the time. So we try out new materials to do this, whether it's malleable material or fixed. We see new technologies on the power generation side that we are constantly looking at. We have great partnerships with the big guys that you would imagine. We'd actually like to see more innovation in that, and especially more innovation in again, the retail space, because it's a different problem you're trying to solve when you're making a single purpose data center for a single application. You can highly optimize it for that layout and for that single application, and that's typically driven by a particular customer, a cloud player. But if you're in sort of a retail space where it's more like an airport, where it's the on-ramps and off-ramps and you got gates and all that, where not all the planes are the same. And so you can only optimize so much before you start to get into the custom build of the company that's using it. So we have to do the balance, and it is a balancing act.
Sure.
So Brian, we've been talking about data centers, but you're CIO of Equinix, and so let's talk about the CIO role. What do you see as your role inside the company as CIO?
Well, it's a great role. So like I said, I've been here about 7 years, and when I came in, they viewed that this could be a potential limiter to growth. If you look at the original post when I joined, that was sort of the comment was, how do you build a scale, and scale Equinix, and that was one. The other one is how do you connect with customers in a more meaningful way, and that's not just through technology. That's also through just communicating best practices. So I break it down into sort of 4 things. One is sustaining, operational excellence. So you don't get the right as a CIO to do much innovation or maybe some of the fun things like spending time with customers. You don't get that right until you get the operational excellence right. So I always tell my guys and gals that sustaining operations is job one, and we have to do that first and foremost. And then second is, as I said, transformational excellence. And what I mean by that is when you're growing at the rate we've been growing, we've gone. I joined when it was about, I think it was about maybe 900 or 900 employees, maybe 800, and we're now at 4,300. So the growth in employees, I joined at I don't know, somewhere in that 900 million in revenue. We exited around 2.5 billion in revenue, somewhere in there. So the growth has been significant. And so transformational excellence is all about how do I transform business process and business systems to support a scaling, growing global company, and there's a number of initiatives in there that we've taken on in the past and we're still taking on to do just that. The third part of my role is innovation excellence. So the team has really focused on innovating. When I think about Cloud Exchange, which is the most recent example, that's never been done before, and writing the software and API enabling the Cloud Exchange is just one example of innovation. We have a number of others. We'll be contributing pretty heavily to open source here in the not too distant future, and so innovation is sort of in our blood. And I'm not a believer in that you just set aside an innovation team and that's what they do is innovation, but that's more of a mindset, and then the structural piece says, how do I create an environment where people can innovate and not fear failure and not think that everything has to be 100% focused on a particular deliverable when we're trying something new. And there's bounds to that, but it's a mindset, and I'm happy and proud to say that it's alive and well here. And then the fourth thing, which to me underpins it all, the fourth element is organizational or people excellence. We have been able to attract real talent, and I think the reason we've been able to is partially because of a clear vision around transformation and innovation, and that we're serious about that, but that we also know that we've got to be operationally sound, because it's interesting. Good people want to work in a place where they're surrounded by other good people. They get to work on cool stuff, and they get to innovate, and they get to feel like one person can make a difference. So to me, the talent or organizational excellence is critical. And it's not all here in the Valley. We have a bunch of brilliant people here in the Valley, but I've got a sizable team in Singapore and a growing team in Brazil, where we acquired into Rio and Sao Paulo. And talent is everywhere, and you just got to go find it and inspire it.
Having watched some of your other previous video interviews and writing, I get a sense that the fifth value might be business value excellence. You talk a lot about making sure IT investment thesis and priorities are very well aligned with your business strategy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that's fantastic question. I think that's tied in my four to sort of the transformation, because in the transformation. So here's what we do. So first of all, absolutely, we must focus on the value and the results delivered. We have a map, and it's a Deloitte map. I think it's called the Enterprise Value Map. And the Enterprise Value Map, it's a wonderful document. People listening should ask Deloitte for it, and I have it on my wall. And what it is it's like an org chart, and at the top of the org chart is enterprise value, and then it's broken down into its components, and those components are revenue or operating margin or asset efficiency, or I think the fourth one was like expectations. And underneath it, it has the kinds of activities that can drive value into those buckets, which drives enterprise value. And it not only has that, but down the left it has, and here's the kinds of things you can do. So when we do when we do IT initiatives, we don't even call them IT initiatives. They're business initiatives that are IT enabled. So when I'm a part of the E team, I report to our CEO. When we talk at our strategy sessions, we lay out the strategic priorities for the year or the next couple years. And when I lay out the IT priorities, they map absolutely and are embedded in those initiatives. So for example, we just launched, you saw in the news, we've launched a channel program. So we have a channel-based initiative in IT to support that, whether that's through systems or process reengineering, or infrastructure, depending on, again, what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Second one, we just acquired Nimbo for hybrid cloud professional services. That was our path towards professional services. And we know, we're very interested in that space. We know we're going to do more because our customers are asking us to do it. Well, professional services, that's a different operating model. So we have to make sure that whatever software solutions or processes that we have now support a professional services organization. So to me, we're the enabler and a clear partner to the business in achieving the strategy we set out. And all the way down to every engineer in my team, they get to see that mapping. And I think you would be impressed. You could talk to a software developer here in Sunnyvale, and he's a Node.js developer, and he'll tell you about how we're trying to drive cloud density in certain markets. That's an engineer. So super important.
So Brian, you have spoken about the idea of a helicopter view of IT, that the CIO should possess this. Maybe elaborate on that.
Yeah, that's my military coming out at me. Sorry. So what I meant is that we have in our role, if we sort of, to coin a phrase, if we sort of lean into our role, we have a helicopter view of the enterprise. We are very, very fortunate that we get to work with and support all functions, all regions, all countries in the enterprise. And so it is a privilege to do that. And with that privilege comes responsibility. And the responsibility is to speak up and step up, right? It's to, when you see things that sometimes you're a dot connector, right? You see this function over here talking about something that this function really needs to know about, and what you find is maybe those functions don't know or haven't been talking. And so with this helicopter view, you get to connect dots for functions. You also get to see what's going on in Singapore, and maybe as a best practice, really that could be used in Brazil, and vice versa. And it's really, it would be hard for me to go back to a single function because of that view and that privilege that I have in this role. And I think it's also our responsibility and duty to do something with the information we get.
So you as the CIO of the helicopter pilot, but it must require a culture of open-minded, collaborative IT organization in order to connect all the dots. I'm assuming you empower your team to make sure that when you do have that upper view, you also have the opportunity to exchange ideas and welcome suggestions and go from what some traditional CIOs may be blamed as CI knows, which is something I've heard you say, to CIOs and IT organizations that may not default to yes, but are certainly open to, making sure that they're listening and collaborating. Is that a fair view of how you have to achieve success if you are going to connect the dots?
Yeah, it's funny. So I have a phenomenal team, starting from sort of this handful of vice presidents all the way down, and we have I would say probably one of the most open and collaborative environments that I've ever worked in. And I think it comes from a basis of trust. It's the whole 5 dysfunctions of a team, and what's the bottom layer is trust. And I think if you have trust, it's amazing what can get done. It's trust equals speed, trust equals sharing, trust equals the ability to connect dots, and yes, be open to ideas. And when I watch, sometimes I sit back and I watch my team operate with the business, because they're mapped into the business, and it's really quite fun to watch. This morning we're in our day 10 of a big UAT cycle. We have probably 150 people around the world testing this transformation project, and we have kickoff at 9 in the morning here. And we put up a couple of slides, and one of the slides we put up was, it's International Happiness Day today, by the way. It's and my buddy he came and spoke to us, Sean Aker of the Happiness Advantage. I put up that slide and I said, yeah, he reminded me that when he tweeted out today, and this whole notion of we're on one team, and I'd rather work together, even if it's their idea or not mine. Let's just be clear on that. I'd rather work together to solve a customer problem, or compete with a company that we're competing with, compete well and fairly and hard, than compete with each other. And I think this sort of openness and dot connecting goes so much further than the other. And we live, I've got it on my wall. Abraham Lincoln, I think it was Lincoln, said it's easier to catch a fly with a drop of honey versus a gallon of gall, right? And so it's just so much easier and better to be kind.
So Brian, you are responsible for customer-facing portal products. This is pretty unusual for a CIO to be facing outward in such a direct way. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, it is interesting. It's lovely, actually. I think there's a little bit of a blend of CIO, CTO roles sometimes in certain companies, and I also think there's this notion of center of excellence. So when I came here, the real center of excellence that we built was in software, whereas the CTO role was much more in network technology and switching fabrics and data center technologies, and we really have in IT a center of excellence around software. And as we built that and we're able to attract some of these really talented software engineers, it became clear that and made sense that we in this team should own all software, and that included customer facing, because we treat our internal clients like customers, and so it's a very similar mindset to engage your customers, to talk to them about what would make their life better, what would make it easier, how do you get them to become more sticky customers, so that they actually integrate your platforms with theirs. And we're sort of experts in integration, and so when you think about SaaS apps, we have about 40 SaaS apps that we use here to run Equinix. And then we've got probably 20 or 30, I don't even know how many on-prem, and we have to integrate SaaS with on-prem. Well, it's sort of similar with integrating outside the walls of the enterprise with your customers to your on-prem, and you could do that through portals where you have a person sitting in front of it and you're engaging them in the user experience and doing all those things. or you can do it programmatically via APIs. But it's the same notion. And if you treat, if you do follow those principles of user or customer engagement, getting them involved in the design, getting them working with you, listening to them, having direct, like we have, for example, a mail alias called Portal Feedback. Every single comment comes in from a customer comes in, and I read every one of them. They come in, and there's a bunch of people on that. There's a bunch of action that gets taken, but it keeps my finger on the pulse of what's going on with our customers. And I think that it's an exciting part of my job. I think we feel absolutely a part of the product strategy and the company strategy. And I also think it's a really nice mesh with the enterprise systems side of IT.
So, you talk about, Brian, collaboration and internal coordination, and you certainly sounds like you absolutely believe that thought leadership exists in the field. The fact that you read all the emails and you proactively seek feedback. Talk to us a little bit about the role of culture, company culture, in not only enabling your 4 pillars of excellence, but helping Equinix become a successful company, and certainly you a successful CIO.
I think that a lot of the success my team and I have had is because of the company we're a part of. This is a I love this company, and the time spent here has been fantastic. And I think when I think of the role of culture, the founder, there were 2 founders, Jay Adelson, who I also think founded Dig, and Al Avery. And Al Avery has passed away, but it really started with these 2 guys. And it's a great story about, a facility and a tech guy in digital had this idea. And it started in Palo Alto, in the Palo Alto Internet Exchange. And it's a great story. And one of the early people that they hired was a man named Peter Van Camp. PVC, as we affectionately call him, is our chairman of the board, and is still actively involved. He sits, right across the hallway from our CEO, and they share an executive assistant, and we talk about everything. And it really all started with PVC. He is such a graceful and genuine human being, and really gets sort of the potential of people. And the people that he hired, there's original people here, people like Keith Taylor, our CFO, Brandy Galvin Morandi, our general counsel, Pete Ferris, our chief customer officer. These people, really do embody sort of the spirit of openness, collaboration, friendship, kindness, hard work. There's no question, but just a lot of good things. And then what happened is it's interesting, because as they brought people in, it's harder to keep that sort of culture that you have as a startup. But you have to nurture it, and I call it, that what I'm the keeper of is the cultural flame for IT, that it needs to be, a team member of this Equinix family, and it's culture to me is everything. It's everything, and it can really be a competitive advantage, or it can be a cancer. And for us, I think it's a competitive advantage.
So Brian, in a nuts and bolts way, what is this view? How do you execute this view of culture? What are the steps you actually take?
Well, I think one thing you have to be is consciously competent, right? You have to be aware and awake, and take it seriously. But I also think it's not, my good friend Ralph Laura, who's a CIO over at HP, Ralph said, I found this really cool culture deck, and I liked it. It was from LinkedIn, and I floated it out on LinkedIn. I shared it, and what Ralph said is, he goes, it's not about slideware or about slogans on a wall. It's about how our people behave. And so, when you talk about putting in a process around culture, I think the first thing you want to do is make it top of mind, and also write it down. It's this whole thing about norms and what's okay and what's not okay. Our CEO, he's a West Pointer, ex West Pointer, Steve Smith. He says, leaders get the behavior they tolerate, and there's just behavior that's not acceptable, and then there's behavior that's just what we want to see. Like, we have this concept of a loyalist framework, and imagine the words if you mean them like this. I am as invested in your success as my own. That's a pretty massive statement, right? If I truly believe and I am as invested in your success as I am my own, think about how selfless that becomes. Think about we have operating norms, things like grant trust. I assume positive intent. These are all things, I'll talk to you and not about you. These are all small statements that really mean a lot, and I think if you really live by them, and then you call people out when they don't, I think it starts to build a culture that is both reinforcing. It can be somewhat aspirational because it's hard. Nobody's perfect, but it creates a place where, again, where that trust is, and where you have trust, you have speed and sharing and openness and collaboration. So I don't know if there's a recipe, Michael, but it's super important topic.
So
Ralph,
Brian, you grew the company from, you said 900 to 4,500 employees in the 6-7 years you've been there. When you're looking to hire an IT professional, whether they're VP direct reports to you, or DevOps, or single contributors, data center experts, what are some of the attributes that you look for when you're bringing and welcoming a candidate to your family?
Well, that's another great question. I think, well, clearly they need to have the competence in the field that you need. So, you can't have just a team of nice guys and gals that aren't competent, right? There's teams out there like that, and while it sure seems like a happy place, and they never miss the birthday cake, they may not get much done. So I think there's a 2x2. I'm not doing the Janet Jackson. I'm just saying there's a 2x2, and the 2x2 is sort of ability or results or whatever, and then so it's what you did, and then the other is the how. And so if you break that 2x2, you got doesn't get results and doesn't maintain the values, you fire them, right? And then if you're up in the other one, they get results and they do it where people flock to their team. Those are your stars, and you motivate, and then it's the other two that are sort of tough in terms of coaching, because if they get the results but they're not living to the values, you either have to coach them over into that other quadrant, or likely they're going to be gone, because you're not going to value results over leaving dead bodies in your wake. And then the other one is, they really do embody the culture, but they're not getting the results. Well, maybe they're in the wrong job. Maybe you can coach them into a new role, etc. So that's how we sort of maintain it for existing employees. For new, it's a combination of the competency axis, and then there's a set of I don't know if you call them attributes. It also might just simply be responses to questions around, let's talk about this scenario. And the scenario might be that you have a deliverable you must get done. your teammate has a deliverable that they have to get done, and they're in deep doo-doo. What do you do? And it's very, and then say, not only what do you do in that hypothetical, give me an example of this in your past. It really will show their tendency to help, their tendency to be a good teammate. You can ask them questions about what about your previous culture did you like and what didn't you like, and the kinds of answers that you get in those questions are pretty interesting, because it sort of can be revealing of the character. So I think it's more that than attributes. I mean, clearly the attributes of teamwork and collaboration, this openness notion that you mentioned. Also, though, passion to drive, because we can't miss the market, so we have to drive, and you can't be afraid of working hard. But those are the kinds of things that we do. It's a really important question, how you hire.
Sure.
Brian, we have just a couple of minutes left, so can you share advice, talking about culture, can you share advice to other CIOs that are in organizations that may not be as receptive or open to the CIO driving innovation? So in other words, how can a CIO drive innovation in the most effective and efficient manner with the results that are desired?
Well, I think if it's, and this is probably not the case for all CIOs, but most CIOs have a budget, and that has some room in it. And what I mean by that is it's, and I know there are certain, and why I said this may not be the case for all is some, manufacturing where you have penny margins, and they live in a different maybe world. But if you're in one where you actually have some room, there's a couple of things I think you can do. One is set aside some money for ideas. Set aside some time for some of your people to work in areas that there's not necessarily an application fit for it today, but there could be some relevance to where you're going. The other thing is set aside some of your time, because I have 4 kids, and just like parenting, vote with your feet. It's not what you say, it's what you do. So if you say, you're really, really, really important to me, and yet you've never attended a school play, or you've never gone and seen them sing, or you've never coached a team, how important, you're saying one thing and you're maybe doing another. So it's the same thing with the CIO's time. If your calendar is jam-packed with meetings only up, or meetings that are with vendors, or meetings that have nothing to do with innovation, then you're sending a message that's not important to you. So vote with your feet. Carve out some time, whether it's brown bag lunches or it's your own time. Like I just spent 90 minutes this morning because my team has a contribution to open source that they want to make. And it, I'm so glad I went. Frankly, it blew me away. And I spent 90 minutes of my time, but it was so worth it, and it didn't cost me a penny. And a lot of it they did on their own, and they said, look at these 5 apps that you didn't even know we built on this framework. We built on it. So I think you'll be surprised what you can do. It does not take a lot of money. It does not take a lot of people, and it doesn't even take a lot of time. It just takes attention. You just need to care about it. It just matters. And it got to the point now here where the individual contributor engineers created a process called Sparkathon. And this Sparkathon is an innovation process where ideas are like sparks. and they are sparking ideas all the time, and they're getting Raspberry Pi development kits where they're doing for $50 or $100. They're saying, hey, we can do an IoT collector. Hey, we can do this, that, and the other. They're coming up with ideas. Some will go nowhere, but some will very much go somewhere, and some will be potentially game-changing. And you just got to care.
All right.
That's what I would say.
That's awesome. Michael, guess what? We made a massive mistake waiting for 103 to have Brian on the show. I'm telling you, I'm super inspired, and I learned a ton from you in 45 minutes. Incredible, incredible insights. And I hope you come back on the show.
I will come back when you're at 203. I want to be 03 guy for you guys.
Well, at the rate you guys are going, you're going to have 230 data centers.
I know.
So I wouldn't be surprised.
You said it here.
So Brian, you're a pretty cool CIO, so let's see you with the cool sunglasses.
Okay, well, let me see. How do these look? These are mine.
Wow. All right. Very cool.
All right.
Let's go innovate.
Let's go. Vote with your feet. I love that.
All right. Let's innovate. And with that, we have been talking with Brian Lillie, who is the CIO at Equinix, on episode number 103 of CXO-Talk. I'm Michael Krigsman. My co-host, Vala Offshore. Vala, high five. Bang. And everybody, tune in next time because we're going to be back. Brian, thank you so much.
Follow Coach Lillie on Twitter. Coach Lillie on Twitter, please.